Okay, so I'm going to have a look at question 3 on the history of the atom. And Thomson had realised from his experiments that there must have been some positive charge in an atom as well as a negative charge of the electrons. And how did he know this? Well, he knew this because atoms were neutral as an overall species. So he knew that because the atoms themselves were neutral, that the positive charges that were in the atom must have been balanced out, counteracted by the negative charges that were in. And obviously they knew about electrons at that stage, so we knew that the electrons which were there must have been counteracted by some sort of positive charge. So the atoms are neutral and electrons are balanced by the positive charge that must have been there. Okay, so he knew that there must have been something in there. Wasn't specifically sure what it was, obviously, in those experiments to prove that protons came later. But obviously he knew there must have been something to counteract that charge out. So if we move into this next question, and this is again one of the 6-mark questions where you've got to kind of write your answers in a well-rounded and grammatically coherent paragraph. But obviously, if we go through the kind of bullet points for the sake of this, then we've got to look at the similarities and the differences between the plum pudding model and then obviously the modern version that we now have. So in terms of the similarities first, which is the shorter list, to be fair, as we've just said in the first one, they were happy that there were areas of positive charge. As I say above, we weren't sure exactly where those positive charges were, but they were aware of areas of positive charge. Okay, so they were both happy for there to be positive charged regions. Okay, they both have electrons. Okay, that was pretty well regarded at that stage. Okay, so they both had the electrons. That was obviously the negative charge to go alongside that. And as a result of that, they were all neutral. Okay, both the plum pudding model and the modern model both have neutral atoms. So then we go into the differences, and this comes into more a case of how the arrangement of that system is. So if we do a plum pudding model on the left, okay, so I want to say plum PP for plum pudding, and then what we have is the electrons were within the plum pudding, but what they said was that the negative charges were just distributed amongst the spherical object. The rest of the material was positive. Okay, and what they said was it was just a positive ball. Okay, and ultimately what that then meant was the negative charges were inside that ball, but what they regarded was that the entirety of the ball itself was just a general mass of positive charge. There weren't specific little individual pieces of positive charge, unlike the modern one, which has, as we now know, a positive nucleus where the positive protons are contained within that central area. So that was one of the differences. Okay, with the plum pudding model, there were no neutrons. Obviously, with our new model now, we now know we have neutral, non-charged things within the nucleus, as we now know, neutrons. But again, differently from the plum pudding, we now know that we have the electrons existing in very specific orbits around the outside. And so these negative charged electrons just exist on the outside, 2 in the first shell, obviously, as we know. And then you build up the rest of the charges around the outside of the shells. But we know that they're now there. Okay. And in terms of mass, obviously the nuclear model, we now know the vast majority is contained within that central nucleus. Within the plum pudding, it was evenly distributed across the whole substance.